The solution to homelessness is housing.
Donald Trump's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, was secretly meeting with an agent of Russian intelligence.
No, it may not solve all the problems, but it sure has filled in the gaps. I said then, and I'm saying now, it could spiral out of control.
For a release for all the hostages, resources to rebuild Gaza.
The U.S. Senate race is heating up, and there was a spicy debate for the California seat where progressives Barbara Lee and Katie Porter took the stage with fellow Democrat Adam Schiff and ex-baseball player and Republican candidate Steve Garvey. The first thing I noticed was Steve Garvey had no business being on this stage, and Katie Porter was by far the best spoken and seemed the most sure of her ideas. As someone who supports a progressive agenda, it was very refreshing to see two truly progressive candidates on the stage. Now, we have tons of clips to get to, but let's start with homelessness.
Our homelessness crisis is a direct result of Washington's failure, decade after decade, to write housing policy and deliver housing policy that is about us, that is about families, and is about people. Did you know there's not even a housing committee in the United States Congress? It's just a subcommittee of banking. And that tells you what you need to know about how Washington politicians think about the problems of housing and homelessness, that it is a tool to keep Wall Street printing money. So I support fully funding Section 8 vouchers. I support low-cost programs to prevent eviction. And I think the bottom line is we must build more affordable housing, because for every person that we help off the streets today in California, we see another person experiencing homelessness. And it's not just people experiencing street homelessness, it's students living in cars, it's families overcrowded in apartments. The solution to homelessness is housing.
She is exactly right here, and the issue is exacerbated by Washington writing terrible zoning laws that makes it unnecessarily hard to build affordable housing where it is needed quickly, when it should be the priority. The main focus of a system like this should be to guarantee shelter, when instead it's profit. You have these corporate donors buying politicians by giving them a bunch of money to win their elections, and then dictating the laws so that they always favor the wealthy and corporate buyers who buy up these properties and then turn them into high value sellers like a mansion, rather than the affordable housing that is needed in these areas and neighborhoods, solely because it won't give them the same profit return.
The evidence is pretty clear. Donald Trump's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, was secretly meeting with an agent of Russian intelligence, giving Russian intelligence internal campaign polling data, while that same unit of Russian intelligence was helping the Trump campaign through a hacking and dumping operation, through a email, through a social media troll farm in St. Petersburg. So yes, that's collusion. And what's more, the Russians reached out to Donald Trump's son, Don Jr., and offered what they said was dirt on Hillary Clinton as part of the Russian government's effort to help the Trump campaign.
I love when people try to talk about Russian interference in the 2016 election as if it was a hoax and it's some sort of a deflection to be like, see what Democrats do? Everything he just laid out was confirmed by a Republican Senate panel, and it led to multiple arrests and convictions, including Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign manager, for directly working with Russia during the election, who was also proven interfered on Trump's behalf. It's just that when you're a Republican, you have to learn to spin things in these crazy ways to cope with the absolutely inhumane acts of your supreme overlord.
Earmarks is just a fancy word for Washington politicians substituting their personal interests, including getting earmarks for their big donors, for what our needs are. Look, the problem here is that earmarks invite corruption.
It would really be a dereliction of my duty to my constituents if I did not fight for every single dollar that I could find, because yes, California is a donor state. They deserve their tax dollars back. And no, it may not solve all the problems, but it sure has filled in the gaps. And let me tell you, health care for communities of color, when you look at the LGBTQ plus community, what they need are unsheltered children. When you look at housing, when you look at a variety of nonprofits that don't have the money.
So a bit of conflicting views here from the two progressives on earmarks. Earmarks being federal money that's then given to Congress members for projects to fund in their area. The issue with this, as Katie correctly laid out, is a lot of people use these to guarantee donors or to pay back their donors which just exacerbates the corruption in Washington, and money in politics will always be a bad thing. But as Barbara Lee also correctly points out, if it's used correctly, these do help with lots of things that would find themselves on the back burner if you were waiting for legislation to be passed to aid them, from healthcare to housing to mental health, things like that. I think that the answer is putting transparency on these earmarks and some sort of requirements or guidelines that have to be followed, an inability to fund projects from your donors. If somebody donated to you, you can't use earmarks on them. Or maybe a need for your constituents in the area you represent to put it to vote, and a majority of them has to agree with the project you want to fund with the earmark. Something like that, I think, could quickly fix the issue.
Well, let me just say, first of all, I voted against the authorization to use military force right after the horrific attacks of 9/11. I voted against the Iraq authorization. I said then, and I'm saying now, it could spiral out of control. You see what's happening. It's escalating in the region. We have to make sure that our national security is also protected. And in fact, as this war escalates, as the Arab nations pull back, then what do we have? We do not have a path to Israel's security, nor do we have a path to a Palestinian state.
Barbara Lee is one of the most consistent voters when it comes to these issues. She had the same response after 9/11, after Iraq, and immediately called for a ceasefire in Gaza as well. I do believe America at least needs to lead in showing Israel that we don't support its actions, and the bare minimum is calling for a ceasefire, which is why it's important to get senators who will actually stand for this, not ones who will hesitate when it comes down to it or otherwise say to wipe Gaza off the map.
I have called for a permanent ceasefire, and I've pushed and identified with specificity what needs to happen to bring Gaza and to bring the people of Gaza to a better future and to make sure that Israel can stay secure. So I have called for a release for all the hostages, resources to rebuild Gaza, making sure Israel is secure and a free state for Palestinians where they can thrive.
So just to be clear, she's calling for a ceasefire right now. You're saying we need to do all this other stuff first, right?
The parties to this conflict are Israel and Hamas. Ceasefire is not a magic word. You can't say it and make it so.
I think she puts it well here. When we say ceasefire, we don't mean snap your fingers and magically it's going to stop. There needs to be steps taken to achieve this goal. But as world leaders and the people that the entire globe looks to before they act, we should be on the forefront of pushing for justice and peace for all, that being for Palestinians and Israelis alike. If you enjoyed this video, we're Social Society. We're a commentary channel influenced by politics, society, and the economy. We are pretty left-leaning on this channel, but we're open to our right-wingers as well. The biggest thing here is having conversations that get everyone to the bottom of the truth. If that sounds like something that could interest you, consider smashing that subscribe button, leaving us a like, or even commenting on this video, because the only way we become a society is together.